Every leader makes decisions. Most are forgotten. Some change companies, industries, and sometimes history. In this video, we're looking at 10 decisions that went terribly wrong. And the interesting part is that many of them probably didn't look terrible when they were made. So this isn't about laughing at bad decisions. It's about understanding why smart people sometimes make them and what we can learn from them. In 1985, Coca-Cola did something almost unthinkable. It replaced the original Coke formula with new Coke after conducting more than 190,000 blind taste tests. The data seemed overwhelming. People consistently preferred the sweeter new formula over Pepsi and the original Coke, but the research missed something critical. People weren't just choosing a soft drink. They were choosing a brand tied to memories, identity, and tradition. Some customers even stockpiled the original Coke. Protest groups formed, and the company was flooded with thousands of angry calls and letters every day. Just 79 days after the launch, Coca-Cola brought back the original formula as Coca-Cola Classic. Leadership lesson. Data can tell you what people choose in a test. It can't always tell you why they care. The biggest business mistakes often happen when leaders measure customer preferences but overlook customer emotions. Ford invested heavily in Edsel and launched it in 1957 with enormous expectations. But customers didn't respond the way Ford expected. Pricing, positioning, styling, economic conditions, and enormous hype all worked against it. Edsel disappeared after only a few years. Leadership lesson. You can have the budget, the marketing, and the organization behind you, but the customer still gets a final vote. In 1962, the Beatles auditioned for Decca Records. Decca chose not to sign them. The Beatles were later signed by EMI's Parlophone label and became one of the most successful acts in music history. Of course, hindsight makes every missed opportunity look obvious. Leadership lesson. Don't judge tomorrow's potential entirely by yesterday's formula for success. Xerox PARC helped pioneer technologies that shaped modern personal computing, the graphical interface, mouse-driven computing, and other major innovations. Yet Xerox didn't capture all the commercial value those breakthroughs eventually created. Having brilliant ideas wasn't the problem. Leadership lesson. Innovation doesn't end with invention. Somebody still has to recognize the opportunity and turn it into a business. Yahoo was once one of the biggest names on the internet. But over the years, changing strategies, acquisitions, leadership changes, and missed opportunities left the company struggling to define exactly what it wanted to become. Some famous Yahoo stories have been exaggerated over time, so we'll stick to what can actually be documented. Leadership lesson. Having opportunities isn't the same as having a strategy. Sometimes the hardest leadership decision is deciding what not to pursue. Blockbuster dominated home video rental. Netflix was founded in 1997 as a DVD by mail rental service. Customers would order DVDs on the Netflix website, and the discs would be delivered through the postal service. When they were done watching, they simply mailed them back using prepaid envelopes. Netflix's founder proposed a partnership involving Blockbuster in 2000, but no deal happened. The bigger lesson isn't simply that Blockbuster supposedly could have bought Netflix. The industry itself was changing, and Netflix kept adapting while Blockbuster struggled. Leadership lesson. Being the market leader today doesn't guarantee that tomorrow's market will work the same way. Here's what makes Kodak fascinating. In 1975, Kodak engineer Steven Sasson built the world's first self-contained digital camera. It weighed about 8 pounds, recorded a 0.01 megapixel black and white image onto a cassette tape, and took about 23 seconds to capture a photo. When Sasson demonstrated it to Kodak executives, the reaction was reportedly polite but skeptical. They recognized the technical achievement but questioned whether consumers would ever want to view photos on a television screen instead of printing them. The bigger issue wasn't that Kodak ignored the invention. In fact, Kodak continued investing in digital imaging. Kodak patented many digital camera technologies. It spent billions on digital research and development. It launched digital cameras in the 1990s. For a time, Kodak was actually one of the world's largest digital camera manufacturers. So why did Kodak struggle? The problem wasn't inventing digital photography. It was changing its business model. Kodak made enormous profits from its film business. Every roll of film, every print, and every chemical processing step generated recurring revenue. Digital photography threatened that highly profitable ecosystem. As a result, Kodak moved into digital, but more cautiously than newer competitors. It struggled to replace the profits from film with new digital revenue streams. Companies like Canon, Sony, Nikon, and eventually smartphones changed the market much faster than Kodak could adapt. By the time digital photography completely replaced film, Kodak's traditional business had collapsed. In 2012, the company filed for Chapter 11 bankruptcy protection. Leadership lesson: the hardest innovation may be the one that threatens a business that's currently making you successful. For years, Nokia was the undisputed leader in mobile phones. At its peak, it was a brand almost everyone owned. Its phones were reliable, durable, had incredible battery life, and were considered the gold standard of the industry. Then the market changed. When Apple introduced the iPhone in 2007, followed by Android, people stopped buying phones just for making calls and sending text messages. They wanted a device that could browse the internet, run apps, play music, take great photos, and become part of a larger digital ecosystem. Nokia wasn't blind to the change. It invested in smartphones and eventually partnered with Microsoft to launch Windows Phone devices. But while Nokia was making decisions, competitors were moving faster. Developers were building apps for iOS and Android. Customers were embracing touchscreens. And the smartphone ecosystem was evolving at an incredible pace. By the time Nokia caught up, the market had largely moved on. Leadership lesson: your biggest threat isn't always a competitor doing what you do better. Sometimes it's your customers deciding they value something completely different. Some business failures cost money. This one cost lives. In 2018 and 2019, two Boeing 737 MAX aircraft crashed just months apart, claiming the lives of 346 people. What followed wasn't just an investigation into a new aircraft. It became a global examination of engineering decisions, safety systems, certification processes, communication, and leadership. The tragedy raised difficult questions about the MCOS flight control system, pilot information, regulatory oversight, and how critical concerns were handled during development. Leadership lesson: when safety, ethics, or people's lives are at stake, bad news isn't something to hide or delay. It's exactly the information leaders need to hear. The most dangerous culture is one where people become afraid to speak up. January 28, 1986. Millions watched the Space Shuttle Challenger lift off. Just 73 seconds later, it broke apart in the sky, killing all 7 astronauts on board. The investigation revealed something unsettling. Concerns about the solid rocket booster O-rings and the unusually cold weather had already been raised before launch. The issue wasn't that no one noticed a risk. It was how that risk was ultimately evaluated and accepted. Challenger changed the way organizations think about decision-making under pressure. It showed how repeated success can create a false sense of confidence, making yesterday's warning seem less urgent today. Leadership lesson: the greatest risk isn't always a problem you don't know about. Sometimes it's the warning you've heard so many times that it no longer feels like a warning. Great leaders never allow familiarity to make them comfortable with unacceptable risk. So what do new Coke, Kodak, Nokia, Boeing, and Challenger have in common? Here's the uncomfortable truth. None of these stories happened because people weren't smart enough. These were some of the brightest engineers, executives, and experts in the world. That's exactly why these stories matter. Because intelligence doesn't make an organization immune to failure. Sometimes the greatest threat to an organization isn't incompetence, it's confidence. It's believing your assumptions no longer need to be questioned. It's becoming so successful that bad news becomes inconvenient. Dissent becomes uncomfortable, and yesterday's formula starts feeling untouchable. By the time reality proves you wrong, it's often too late. That's why I don't study these stories to criticize the people who made the decisions. I study them because every organization, including ours, is capable of making the same mistakes. History rarely repeats the exact same mistake. It simply finds leaders who believe it won't happen to them. That's why the most dangerous words in business are often, "We've always done it this way," or "That would never happen here." The moment you stop questioning your own success is often a moment your decline quietly begins. If you found this video helpful, I'd appreciate it if you could give a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. It really helps us continue creating practical, straightforward learning content. And if you're looking for more free templates, articles, tools, and training resources, visit the TIV Learning Library. We built it to help professionals, leaders, trainers, and organizations keep learning and improving. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.